Tim trudged through the front door, exhausted from another long day at the factory. He had been working non-stop for weeks, trying to make ends meet, but it seemed like no matter how hard he worked, they were still struggling to get by. As he dropped his keys onto the counter, his eyes landed on the stack of bills that needed to be paid. His mind began to wander as he thought about their financial situation and how he was going to come up with the money for rent. That's when he saw it, a text message on her phone from someone named Michael. Tim's heart sank as he read through the conversation, his eyes scanning the screen in horror. At first, he tried to convince himself that it was just a harmless flirtation, but as he continued to scroll through the messages, he realized that this was something much more serious. The way Lola was talking to him, the way she was laughing and flirting with Michael. It was all too familiar. Tim's mind began to reel as he thought about all the times he had caught her looking at other men, all the times she had made excuses for why she couldn't come home early from work. He felt like he was living a lie, like everything they had built together was a facade. He tried to push the thoughts away, telling himself that he needed to talk to her about it, but as he sat down at the kitchen table, his hands began to shake. He couldn't do this alone, not yet. As the hours ticked by, Tim's anxiety grew. He knew he had to confront Lola, but he was scared of what she might say, of how she would react. What if she denied it? What if she blamed him? Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Tim got up and walked into their bedroom. Lola was sitting on the edge of the bed, her eyes fixed on something in the distance. "Hey," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. Lola turned to face him, a look of guilt written all over her face. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice trembling. Tim took a deep breath and showed her the phone. "I saw the messages," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Lola's eyes dropped to the floor as she realized she had been caught. "I can explain," she said, her voice shaking. Tim cut her off. "No, you can't explain. You can't just lie to me and expect everything to go back to normal." He felt like he was going to vomit as he thought about all the times he had cheated on his own father, all the lies he had told himself to justify it. He knew he wasn't perfect, but this was different. Lola stood up, her eyes blazing with anger and tears. "You have no right to be so angry," she spat. Tim felt a surge of adrenaline as he stood up, his fists clenched at his sides. "I have every right to be angry," he said, his voice rising. "You've been lying to me for months, maybe even years. You've been cheating on me with my boss." Lola's face crumpled as she realized the full extent of her betrayal. "I'm sorry," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. Tim felt a pang of sadness as he looked at her. He knew he was hurting her, but he couldn't help it. He had been hurt too many times before. As the night wore on, Tim and Lola sat in silence, the tension between them palpable. They both knew that things would never be the same again. In the end, they decided to go their separate ways, each one trying to pick up the pieces of a shattered relationship. Tim was left to wonder if he had been blind to the signs all along, if he had just ignored the warning signs because he didn't want to believe it. As for Lola, she was left to face the consequences of her actions, to try and make amends with the man she had hurt so deeply.